Q&A. What if your partner is scared of hurting you in the future, that he tries to push you away? What if the spark or the excitement between us is no more? What counts as mistakes in a relationship and can still be forgiven no matter how bad it is? In this video, I'm going to answer these questions, but before I do, I asked the person who shared this to give me their answer first. And they answered the first question in relation to hurting their partner or their partner not wanting to get hurt or something weird like that. I want to help him understand that it's okay to feel that way and try to understand him better. I want to support him in every way. Even if I end up getting hurt in the end, I'll be happy that at least we tried. Also, for the rest of the answer, I don't know what to do. We've got to sort of throw a little bit of fun in there. So these questions are in relation to a video I posted yesterday titled 3 Tips on How to Prevent Your Relationship from Ending. And in that video, I basically gave 3 tips. Duh, obviously, it's titled 3 Tips. The first tip was deciding to be radically accountable for our mistakes and shifting blame away from our partner. The second tip I gave was to not villainize your partner. And tip number 3, among many other things I said, is to just completely stay quiet. And there's a massive reason we need to stay quiet. Because in this quiet space, we can utilize our imagination, and it also gives the other party the opportunity to utilize their imagination, preferably in a commendable manner. We would like to use our imagination where we see things working out for us, as opposed to dwelling in these horrible spaces where we actually imagine our partner is scared. We imagine them trying to push us away. We imagine we're not good enough. We don't want to be imagining things like this. Imagination kind of sounds a little woo-woo, but it is one of the most practical things that you have at your disposal, because your imagination precedes a lot of the things that occupy our world. And so the question is, what are you imagining? No building was ever constructed that first preceded thought, which means if we're where we are today, then we've imagined this. There is something in our heart that's brought this into fruition, especially if our partners are pulling away, going cold, etc. They might not necessarily even be doing that, but we interpret it that way. And because we interpret it that way, so it shall become. And so we have to start reinterpreting things. That's the number 1 skill. If someone is actually, objectively, doing something, then we need to find the silver lining. We need to evaluate the pros and the cons, mitigate the cons, and amplify the pros. This is a problem where everyone kind of devalues the pros and amplifies the cons. So if I was this person, right, this lass, I would say, do I want to help him understand that it's okay to feel that way? This is only something you'd ever need to say one time. It's not your responsibility to make your partner happy. It's not your partner's responsibility to make you happy. You each have your own responsibility to make yourselves happy. If you're going to support each other, it must not be at the expense of your integrity, your personal integrity, your structural integrity. That's what I used to do quite a lot, not even with romantic interests. It was just people I wanted to be friends with who were just living really horrible lives. And I would try to devote my attention and self to that person just so they could be my friend. But in doing so, I would be sacrificing my own integrity, sacrificing sleep, sacrificing health, sacrificing my own mental wellness. And certainly by dwelling in our imagination on these things that we imagine our partner to be, which they're probably not, that's not doing us any favors. Also, now I don't mean to be judgmental or anything, but you have an anime profile. Now, no judgment against anyone who has anime profiles, but I have a hunch that people who sometimes have these profiles tend to feel a bit insecure. They have a bit of shame. Now, I could be completely wrong, but I feel a sense of shame peppered in behind some of these questions and ideas. Because if we didn't feel shame, would we be in a position right now where we're asking questions like this, or we're experiencing potential fears? This isn't set in stone. It's just a little observation that I've come up with. Let's go to part 2. What if your partner is scared of hurting you in the future and that he tries to push you away? I just thought I'd come back to the question real quick because it is in relation to the 3 things that I provided. And I just want to see how this question actually even relates to my video at all. And I'm trying to connect the dots here, actually, because it it obviously tells me that our mind is elsewhere. Our mind is focused, perhaps even fixated on a problem, which is a trap. It's not something that we inherently want to do. It's just something that you might not notice until someone points it out to you. So I would say that our focus really needs to be, how can I be accountable? How can I not villainize my romantic interest? And how can I just be quiet? And by asking yourself questions as opposed to statements, the mind wants those questions answered. It's a bit like a vacuum cleaner. It really sucks in trying to answer the question. And then you might be fixated for hours just trying to figure out the answer. So we want to be very mindful about what questions we're actually asking ourselves. Because if we ask ourselves questions in our own mind, in our own free time, and in our heart, things like, my partner's trying to pull away or whatever, the relationship may or may not be coming to an end, like who knows, how do I stop this? How do I do this? How do I get them to like me, etc.? Those questions are like a vacuum cleaner in themselves, and they will suck you in, and they will actually pull you in the direction that you don't actually want. Because at the same time, we're full of fear, or we can be full of fear, and we actually inadvertently shoot ourselves in the foot. Because it is by trying to prevent the very thing you're afraid of is what brings the damn thing about in the first place. Extreme example, but imagine a lass with daddy issues. That's the typical lass who's more than likely going to try and self-sabotage. And if you can sort of read past that surface level, you can see someone like that actually does the things that they do because they're scared. So what if we were to look at our own partner and look at their behavior and reinterpret the behavior and understand the reason they might distance themselves, or the reason they might pull away, or whatever it is that's going on? We look at the good side of this. They have a good reason. Just like when you pull away, just like when you go cold, just like when you're an asshole, you have a really good reason. When you speed down the freeway, you're not an asshole. You have a good reason, at least in your mind. And it's the same for your romantic interest. Also, since we're already on this question, let me just finish up with the, I want to support him every way, and if I ended up getting hurt in the end, I'll be happy that at least we tried. Trying is such a tricky word. Trying. Don't like it. But you're kind of already setting yourself up to get hurt, because you're imagining getting hurt. You're already imagining getting hurt. We cannot be afraid of getting hurt. That's what I was so afraid of, actually. I was always afraid of getting hurt. I would do everything I could to not get hurt. And by being so afraid of getting hurt, that I would do everything in my power to not get hurt. You don't say it outright, but it reeks under the table. And so you can't be afraid of that. If someone's going to hurt you, cool. The best analogy I have for this is one of my own childhood examples, is where my mother once said to me that you're going to have to leave. Just kind of like out of the blue. It was a form of control, an attempt to control me. And I just said, okay. And then she just completely froze, and she's like, oh, really? Completely shocked that I was completely fine about being kicked out. And so if you're completely unfazed, completely okay with getting hurt, well, how can someone hurt you if that's not something they can control you with? Unfortunately, with government things, they try to give you fines and tickets and threaten you with repossessing your items. Unfortunately, it really is just about the leverage. And so with modern day leverage, they can take away your right to basically live in peace. They take away your rights. They take away your food. They be in control of your food, etc. So this is actually a very big problem in the political realm. But in the relationship space, I think it's kind of more in the head. You want to be in a position where you're not afraid of getting hurt. Like, it's literally not even something that you think about. If something happens, then you can already imagine the best case scenario on how to deal with that. And the best case scenario on how to deal with pain is to already be okay with it. Just like to revert our attention back to being accountable, not to villainize your partner, and to imagine things better by being in a quiet space. In terms of keeping the relationship alive, I've already stated that your happiness should not depend on the other party, and same goes for your romantic interest. You are responsible for your own happiness. If you decide to share and make your partner happy, etc., that's a great gift, but it is not something that you depend on. And the reason I say that is because it removes the pressure away from you and your partner from having to artificially keep the relationship alive. And In terms of what I call the law of the antithesis, which basically means if there's light, there's dark, if there's hot, there's cold, one cannot exist with the other, there is such a thing as artificial versus natural. And you'll see with logical relationships, I think these lean a lot more into artificial territory, whereas natural, imaginative relationships don't really need a lot of justification or reasons to exist. They just feel natural. And so I would say that you cannot artificially create the spark. And this is a massive problem with dating advice, because even if you follow the letter to the T, I don't think you'll be successful in creating the emotional spark, because logic and emotions are completely different things. The Bible says that the letter killeth, but the spirit make alive, which means even if you follow instructions to the T, it is not the thing, the action, the advice, etc., that actually brings about success. It is the spirit, consciousness, where your attention is. And if we focus our attention a lot more on the natural things, on the emotional side, self-restraint emotional side, not overtly vomiting emotions, being vulnerable, for example, is a great way to feel connected. Understanding the other party and being empathetic towards the other party is a great way to ignite a spark. Being flirtatious is a great way to ignite a spark. That's my standard go-to. Flirting, but not from the place of the ego, because the ego turns that upside down. And so when you're in a relationship, by the way, because in a relationship, that is an agreement between at least two parties. And traditionally speaking, I'm only referring to a man and a woman. In some cases, maybe more than one woman. And it is your own responsibility to create the natural environment that evokes the natural spark. It is not something that you should depend on your partner for doing. You should worry about your own light. You are the lamp. Instead of focusing on the antique sitting at the base of the lamp, you just focus on your light. Are you shining dark light or are you shining good light? And over the course and period of time where you've been shining good light, for the sake of shining good light, not for the sake of trying to bring about a spark or a manifestation, you shine good light because that's who you want to be. It's no one else's responsibility for the lamp to shine brightly. It is your own responsibility to shine brightly. And you just go about doing the things that you love. And you share that. And you'll invite the other party to join you if they would like. And maybe even use your own imagination. And I don't mean to say that in a dismissive manner. I mean, in a practical sense, let's use our imagination and our belief systems in a way that constructs the thing that we want. Who we are is what manifests. We are the sum total of our belief systems. I suppose also just finishing this off real quick, because there's a lot to say here. Relationships will typically end if the pain of staying in the relationship is greater than the pain of leaving. And that's like the collapse point. So just keep that in mind. So really, you'd want to make sure that the pain of leaving is by default much greater than the pain of staying, because either direction is painful. Every choice is painful. Every choice has its pros and cons. And one of the ways we can make it much more painful for this relationship to be painful, which we don't want, we make it artificial. And one of the ways we make it artificial is we could be expecting things in return, and we sacrifice our integrity for the sake of keeping the relationship alive. So I say to you, do not expect anything in return. If you give a gift, you don't want the other person to feel obligated to give you something back in return. Reciprocation is a gift, just like sexual intercourse. When the lass provides sex to the dude, that is her gift. It is not necessarily something that, yes, he can expect, but it's not something that he can take away. It's something that she wants to give. Even if there is a transactional nature in the relationship dynamic, I don't think it should feel artificial. Also, I just realized here for the first time actually, you're a bit older than him, and I think he feels pressured. When it comes to pressure, we probably want to remove that, because I think pressuring someone to keep the relationship alive or pressuring someone to do something they don't want to do, I don't know. I don't think it's going to be a good feeling. Let the person themselves self-induce the natural feeling. And hey, maybe if the relationship does go downhill in Southside, and they say to you, oh, I feel so pressured by this. You know what you do? You sit down and you agree with that and you let it take its course. I reckon they're going to be so shocked when they just completely see you accept that. If we get to that point, we don't want to be getting to that point, but if that happens, you just sit there, you say, okay, you accept it, you're not afraid of that, don't take it personally. You might be asking yourself your questions like, why is this happening? What did I do to get to this point? But don't ask those questions. Not yet, at least. Maybe like a year down the track, maybe? Because these questions need to be coming from a place of self-reflection, not guilt or shame or stress. Because even if we found the answer to it now, we wouldn't be able to resolve the relationship crumbling. And any third dimensional action we're going to be taking, for the most part, is going to be fairly futile. So that's why I say we need to be completely quiet. Because in these quiet spaces, our romantic interest is going to be projecting a lot of ideas onto us. Just kind of like what we might have been doing this whole time to them. We're projecting our own fears. We're projecting our own insecurities onto them, assigning fault and blame to them. What counts as a mistake in a relationship that can still be forgiven no matter how bad it is? This is a new, fresh take that I'm filming here because my last video was completely zilch quiet. So I'm redoing this. Right off the bat, I'd like to revert our attention to the book of Luke, chapter 6, verses 37 and 38. And basically the scripture says, judge not, and you shall not be judged. Condemn not, and you shall not be condemned. Forgive, and you shall be given. Somewhere down along the track, it says, for the same measure that you measure with, it shall be given back to you. The amount of judgment that you give is the amount of judgment you will receive. The amount of forgiveness that you give is the amount of forgiveness that you receive. So what happens when you cross a red line? Now, typically red lines are probably referring to disproportionate things like cheating, infidelity, all kinds of things, really. All kinds of things. And I've definitely had many red lines crossed. But I am a forgiving person. And by the measure of forgiveness that I like to give, I'm confident that the measure of forgiveness is what I will also receive. Because from a moral standpoint, we all sin. We're not necessarily perfect. That's not an excuse per se to carry out disproportionate behaviors and choices, but it can somewhat explain why we fall into these traps. And if you want to be kind of free from judgment, free from condemnation yourself, free from error, you've got to be kind of prepared to forgive people and not have condemnation in your heart. Just kind of like with my romantic interest, is I don't have any condemnation in my heart towards her. We've had some hiccups here and there, and I felt very hurt, but I'm also prepared to forgive because I see past the surface. She's not a terrible person. She's a very lovely woman. And if I was to continue sitting in this place of judgment and condemnation, then I'm only doing that to myself. I'm condemning and judging myself, really. For me personally, there are definitely quite a few red lines. Many of them have been crossed several times, but one of the big ones would be injecting foreign substances into children without my knowledge or consent. Another one would be watching them turn into a furry almost overnight. Now, in my heart, I can readily forgive and not hold condemnation, but it's not something I'm going to be supportive of or accept or stand by. Because if that person chooses to go down the route of hell, the route of insanity, the point of no return, that's not a path I'm willing to follow. The Kuf jab religion, where everyone was forced to get the Kuf jab. I'm not going to get the Kuf jab just because everyone else is telling me that I should and is so scared and hypochondriac. If everyone wants to chuck a massive fit about it, I'm not going to let that pressure get to me where I cave in and sacrifice my integrity. Now, back then, during those days, I definitely felt a lot more threatened by this caving in pressure and government interference. But now, these days, I'm not going to be so volatile in my expression. I'm just going to be completely calm and mellow. And so if a red line is crossed, how you respond really sets the stage moving forward. If someone crosses a red line, You don't want to be going down to that same level. You don't want to be enacting revenge. You don't want to be playing games of trying to get them to be jealous. You want to respond in a very calm and mellow manner. Do not return fire with fire, because it's a personal choice if you would like things to continue from that point onward. If you want things to continue from that point onward, fantastic. We've got our work cut out for us. But if we don't want to continue anything from that point onward, then you're kind of taking the easy way out. And that's completely fine. When there's no obligation to necessarily stay per se, unless there's other sort of binding contracts.